Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, program director. MTN's group CEO thought that I'm supporting the wrong team. I said you should wait until we win the title. So good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Your Royal Highness, the group CEO of MTN, the chairman of MTN Nigeria, CEO of Nigeria MTN, ladies and gentlemen, I'll stand on existing protocols. So the job that I have today is to discuss something that is very close to my heart, which is also very important to our dear country. And that is discussing fiscal policy and tax reforms. So welcome to the Honorable Minister. So I'll start by saying that I'm a friend of the capital markets and a friend of the telecom industry. Even before my current role, I've always been an advocate for sensible reforms and policies to drive the growth of the capital markets. And that's because it's very obvious that the fastest way to create wealth is for you to have investments. Without investment, there can be no growth. And what is the best way or better place to find investments other than the capital market, both for the public and the private sector? Our capital market is growing, but still, in my view, nascent. We have a long way to go. We want to give South Africa a run. We should have the largest capital market in Africa, and that's the goal for us. So, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu set up the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms and asked me to lead that important assignment for our country. And some of the things I'll share with you are the things we are already doing and those that we are planning to do, and how we think that would impact on the capital market, and our ask from you in terms of how we can work together to get to that destination that we do so desperately desire. First is the tax policy and philosophy of the government. And you may have heard Mr. President say these words himself, but I'll repeat them. And that is that tax and fiscal policy more broadly should enable businesses, should facilitate growth and stimulate development. In designing our taxes, we should not tax capital. We should not tax investments. We should not tax production. And most importantly, we should not tax seeds, but fruits. So in other words, instead of taxing capital, we'll wait for the returns on your investment and we'll share out of your prosperity. Instead of taxing production, we'll wait and tax the consumption. Even while at that, would ensure that we protect the vulnerable people so that they don't live in more poverty than they already are. Now, growth is more predictable, actually, when you're looking for how to mobilize revenue for the government. You know, sometimes we have this wrong notion of, I just need to introduce a new tax, pass the law, the tax man collects it, and then the revenue will come. No. Tax laws and tax authorities do not generate revenue. Revenues are generated by economic activities. Tax laws and tax administration is how we decide the portion of that prosperity and economic activity that will transfer to the government by way of taxes. In other words, if anything is more important than the tax law and administration, it is the economic activities driving those revenues. So for us, it's very clear that we have to support growth, including the capital market. The terms of reference of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee specifically includes improving competitiveness and stimulating economic growth. And we have the capital market very well represented on our committee. Some of the issues we have been working on, these would interest everyone, and I'll commend MTN for this excellent initiative. So thank you for doing this for Nigeria. Some of these would also be of interest to the telecommunications industry. Many of us would have seen and read that the telecom sector pays something for 40 plus, maybe about 43 different taxes. I was speaking to manufacturers and they said in some states, they pay up to 197 different taxes, levies, and fees. Yesterday I was with the Faith Foundation and they were talking about MSMEs. And many of them are paying taxes in double digits. In fact, when we're speaking to market traders, Matan, they said to us that those who are selling pure water, for those who are not based in Nigeria, it's water in sachets. They said they pay 7 tickets every single day. They call it tickets. 7 tickets every single day. Mr. President himself has called out this, so we have to fix it. It wasn't a problem created by God or by the United Nations or by the West. It was created by us, so we can fix it. There is a growing trend that is concerning in Nigeria, and that is that if you want to make money, set up an agency, find 0.2%, 1% in the law to fund the agency, and we wait until we set up the next one. As at the end of the 9th National Assembly, a few months ago, there were over 250 bills at different stages at the National Assembly. We did an interesting exercise. We went through each and every one of those bills, looking for provisions about taxes and levies. Ladies and gentlemen, we found over 40 at different stages, over 40 bills with new provisions to impose a new tax and a new levy. And I said to myself, if anybody was really adding up these taxes, it will be very close to 100% now. Maybe it has even exceeded it, such that it will no longer make economic sense. If you want to fully comply with the law to do any business in Nigeria, we have to fix that. So, we are very ambitious. Officially, there are over 60 different taxes in Nigeria across the levels of government. Our target is to make that a single digit. In other words, when we are done, all taxes combined, local government, state and federal government, should be less than 10. Data also says to us that actually, even as of today, more than 97% of government revenue from taxes is coming from less than 10 taxes. Why do you have over 200 illegal taxes all over the place that are only just making life difficult for the people without generating revenue for the government? We also think, based on data, that the Nigerian capital market is one of the heavily taxed in the world. In fact, we rank in the top 10 of the highest tax on capital market, particularly equity investment. You know, many people will say, well, dividend is taxed at 10%. No, it is not 10%. Before you get the dividend, the company paid corporate income tax, 30%. They paid education tax, it's now 3%. In fact, the education tax we pay in Nigeria is calculated on a base that is twice the size of the base for corporate tax. So in terms of the incidence, the education tax is like 6%. Add it to 30, that gives you 36. And depending on the sector you operate, we have information technology tax, we have NASENI, we have all manners of income taxes you need to add up before you now pay the dividend and you deduct 10%. Effectively, the tax on equity investment in Nigeria is over 40%. This is easily one of the highest in the world. And it's like a contradiction for a country that needs all the investment that we can get. So we want to also address that. We want to not only harmonize the number of taxes, we want to harmonize the revenue collecting agencies. We do not think that we should have 63 plus agencies at the federal government level aiming to collect revenue and taxes of all forms and shapes. Many of them have forgotten the primary reasons why they were set up and they are competing with the Federal Revenue Service. We even think that even the Nigerian Customs Service should focus on facilitating trade, protecting our border, not trying to generate revenue. That's the work of the tax authority. We want to review waivers and incentives so we can create a level playing field, because if you do not have access, and I do, and I can call someone and I get a waiver, import duties, waiver, income tax, we operate in the same market, you have no connections or contacts, you will not be competitive. Actually, what we end up doing, if you take that along with tax evasion, is when you do not address tax evasion, you create an incentive for those who are doing wrong and a punishment for those who are doing right. I do my business, I make my profit, I pay 30%. You do the same business, you make your profit, you don't pay a dime. You can actually outperform me in the market and send me out of that market eventually. We want to also improve transparency, and we are thinking about some ideas. This conversation is still ongoing, but we're thinking that the unclaimed dividend, which about 2 years ago we had the Finance Act that says, let's give this money to the government. And when the people show up, they can collect their money back. We know that many of them will not show up, right? Because they are dead. Nobody knows that they had those money. We're thinking, why don't we use that to create a fund that we can manage to invest, maybe in fintech, maybe in some small businesses. And we also have, as part of our mandates, looking at African continental free trade area. How can Nigeria participate competitively and take the leadership in this very important area for our country? We have an aspiration to say, why can't Nigeria be the hub for tech and startups in Africa? Why can't we be the research and development center for Africa? Why can't we be the innovation center for Africa? Why can't we be a preferred location for headquarters companies, for shared services, for remote work location, the capital market center for Africa? Why can't we? When we're looking at the laws, we actually realize that some of the impediments why we don't today, we are not currently competitive, are based on our laws, including legal provisions and some of them tax provisions. For example, when you call your bank, or sometimes just call anything, call your service provider in Nigeria, chances are that an Indian might pick the phone call to attend to you, even though you are based in Nigeria, your service provider is based in Nigeria. Why is it that there are not Nigerians answering those calls for global organizations? I actually think that we speak better English than the Indians. But the reason is, before I left PwC, 3 global multinationals making revenue in tens of billions of dollars reached out and said, we would like to hire Nigerians in Nigeria to work for us. Please answer the following questions. I knew they were not coming back because we have a provision we inherited from before independence, I think, that suggests that if you have employees in Nigeria, it doesn't matter where you are, in addition to those employees paying their taxes, we would ask you to come to Nigeria because we think you've created what we call permanent establishment, and you must equally pay your taxes. Imagine I'm a US corporation, and I'm looking for smart people to hire around the world to work for me remotely. And somebody says that about Nigeria, but Kenyans don't have the same problem, Indians don't. Why must I insist about hiring Nigerians? What we have done to ourselves is we've shut out opportunities for particularly our young people. In addition to that, we're losing out on the opportunity to earn foreign currency that could have helped us to stabilize our foreign exchange. We are also addressing that. We have an objective to promote entrepreneurship, including MSMEs, rationalizing incentives, and enabling the capital market to grow. So, as I conclude, we think that at the end of the day, we have to work together to address these challenges that we face today. No one has the monopoly of knowledge to fix all of them. And that is why we're very big on stakeholder engagement and public consultation. We already issued our stakeholder engagement plan. If you want to share anything with us, you can go to fiscalreforms.ng. You'll find a lot of information on this dedicated website, including our terms of reference and stakeholder engagement. For those who may not have access to the internet or like to do otherwise, we have a dedicated email account. We have a dedicated WhatsApp account. We have social media accounts. Just remember Fiscal Reforms NG, and you'll find us everywhere. And for those who still don't want to do any of that, we have physical offices where they can write. They don't even need to type them. They can be handwritten. We will read everything. We have a commitment that every Nigerian, actually not every Nigerian, anyone in Nigeria or elsewhere, that's a stakeholder in the Nigerian project that has something to say will be heard. As part of our engagement plan, we are engaging with all stakeholder groups, including Nigerians living with disabilities, including Nigerians in the diaspora. If they are sending us $20 billion a year, then we need to listen to them. We need to share from their experiences, what they have seen in countries where they live and work. What can we learn from them? This is not an engagement to find a way to tax people who live abroad. No. It is to thank them for their contribution to our economy and see what we can learn from their experiences. So, we'll be looking forward with excitement to the outcome of this conference. I can promise you that once you share the outcome with us, we would act on them on behalf of the country. By the way, even though we were set up by the president as a presidential committee, we quickly realized that the issues we have to deal with go beyond the federal government. So we went to the National Economic Council. The VP facilitated that for us, and we asked the governors to adopt us as their committees as well, and that they have done. So we can now confidently say that we have a national committee looking at that important area of fiscal policy and tax reform. By the way, our work is divided into 3 broad pillars. One of it is fiscal governance, essentially saying, how do you manage your finances? Borrowing, revenue, spending. Not only should you spend well, the priority of your spending must make sense and must correlate with the priorities of your people. If you have 133 million people living in multidimensional poverty, maybe your priority is not going to the moon, building flyovers and airports. Maybe it is to provide clean water, basic education, road from farm to the markets, and so on and so forth. The second pillar is revenue transformation, of which tax is a component, but we also have non-tax revenue, including government assets, government-owned enterprises, and natural resources. How can we optimize value? I was speaking to the CEO of Ministry of Finance Incorporated yesterday, and the numbers we're looking at are mind-boggling. We just have trillions and trillions of assets all over the place that are being wasted or sometimes mismanaged. And the third pillar of our work is economic growth facilitation, which I already told you about. So I'll close. Again, just to repeat, that we look forward to the engagement with you, not only just out of this conference, but on an ongoing basis. Please do share with us your concerns, and more importantly, your recommendations. Because more often than not, it's easy to complain, but finding the solution is really what we are focusing on, not the past. I'll close with this quote that I always like to say. And it was a quote credited to Abraham Lincoln, which is that if you do not like the Nigeria you see today, I haven't met, by the way, any Nigerian who says, this is the Nigeria of my dream, not a single one. But you will see that the love and passion that Nigerians have for their country, even after they have left, is unparalleled. Therefore, if Nigeria of today is not the Nigeria of our dream, we can work together to create that Nigeria that we truly want, and I think that we also deserve. Abraham Lincoln said, and I quote, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Idiri, for the presentation. For the records, my name is Nona Au. I am not tempted to ask the question, but I thought that it's important that some things are said concerning the job that you have at hand. If my late father built a house in Abeokuta and he passed on, and we probably didn't know the next 20 years that he had a house in Abeokuta, does that house become abandoned property for Ogun State? I ask this because one of the things that I've heard several times from government end is that unclaimed dividends should go to government. Before now, that money becomes status bar after 10 years, and it goes to the company that the initial investment was made in. So I would think that as a committee, one of the things you probably should do is to make the companies that allow that sum to accumulate to pay an interest higher than the market rate, and then you see that unclaimed dividends, most likely, if it doesn't disappear, it will reduce substantially because the company then knows that there's a penalty attached to it. I was also very elated when I heard you talk about tax being an instrument for growth and development. And I'll be asking, what are we likely to do differently with small companies as a way of allowing them to grow with the intention that long time down the line, they'll probably make higher contribution to the nation's economy than everybody is running after everybody in making sure that they collect their head, their leg, and their arm even before they start to produce. And lastly, I was also happy that you talked about the states have taken interest in the work that you do. I live in Lagos, and I've experimented going from Alabado to Obalende, and I was amazed that there were over 50 bus stops that Agbero will collect money from downfall operators. Should this, your committee work, get ended, will Lagos State believe that you should take away Agberos from Lagos? Because if they are going to ask you to do work on their behalf, I also think that you should be asking them to give a commitment that they will also take the outcome of your findings. I want to again thank you and thank MTN for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Tracy from SBG Securities. Couple of questions on my end. First, on tax collections on telecom sector. Yeah? You've talked about consolidating the existing federal taxes, but I'm more curious about the benchmarking of Nigeria versus other countries, particularly in regards to excise and VAT. So first on excise, if you look at the financial services sector, when it's telco-led, it's a very big channel for improving the access point in terms of taxation for the informal sector. So is Nigeria thinking about expanding its taxation to mobile financial services? And then second, if you look at VAT rates in Nigeria versus other countries, Nigeria as well looks much lower than the rest of the other countries. So as you consolidate, is the strategy as well to increase the tax base in the telecom sector, or do you think that with the current inefficiencies if addressed, there's no need for you to tap into the telecom sector? Thank you.
You got that? Okay. We'll just take one more and then we'll wrap up this session. One more.
Good morning. My name is Sadiq Abu. I work with ABSA. Thank you, Mr. Oyedele, for your insightful presentation. Two questions, if I may. I know your committee has identified certain quick wins. I do know that that is a focus of the committee. Can you shed some light in terms of the timelines for some of these quick wins? Do you anticipate that some of these wins will come in the next Finance Act? And can you sort of like give us your best sense of some of those quick wins that we expect to see perhaps in the next Finance Act? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Oyedele, over to you.
Thank you very much for those excellent questions. They're really very nice questions, so thank you very much. The first one on unclaimed dividends. You know, my personal view when this was, I was a member of the committee when this discussion was taking place before the Finance Act was amended. And my personal view that I shared at the time was we should spend our energy trying to find out why is it that we have so much unclaimed dividend, and try and address those impediments first, rather than quickly saying, if they haven't claimed it, government can borrow it. But that was my personal view, and of course it did not fly. So we're where we are today. I have to say that based on the research we have done, it is not strange for the government to be interested in the unclaimed dividend. Because essentially what we had before was, after a period of time, that money goes back to the company. Actually, what you've done is you've appropriated the asset of party A and you're giving to party B, C, D, right? That's what you've done. So it's not like that's a perfect solution and government came up with the option of let's borrow it. And we're now thinking maybe government should not borrow it. How about we use that fund to promote the capital market and by extension economic development? So that's still being debated. And we welcome input from everyone. Now, your other question is, what are we going to do differently for SMEs to grow? One thing I have said consistently, even before my current role, is that I know enough about the challenges facing businesses in Nigeria to even say that when you're asking for incentives, you're asking the wrong question. That what you should be asking for in Nigeria is to remove these incentives. The good thing about removing this incentive is it does not cost government money, but it saves the private sector a load of headache and even money as well. You just free up the whole space for economic activities to be stimulated at scale. So for SMEs, we think they will be the biggest beneficiary of our tax harmonization. Indeed. Okay, thank you. So that at the end of the day, a small business owner will not have to pay 15 taxes. Nobody even knows where those taxes start and end, which is a problem by itself. Maybe a small business will only have to pay 1 or 2 taxes, and they can pay that on their mobile phone, start something, start something, and then the receipt comes on the mobile phone. We want to outlaw cash payments for taxes. So that way, the little amount that we pay gets to the government, there's proper accountability, and the people who are paying them don't have to pay so many, they pay just so little, and then it's properly accounted for. Would Lagos State agree for us to remove agberos? That's a very important question, but we're doing this for Nigeria, and we know that Lagos State is on board. In fact, the governor of Lagos State is very eager. When I said we're coming to visit some governors, just so we also localize our intervention and hear them out. So he's very eager for us to meet. So we're going to find a space for everyone in the new system we are trying to create. Maybe those agberos will now become people who ask you, show me your mobile phone that you have paid, right? But will not ask them to be collecting taxes for Nigeria anymore. We've also seen many instances, especially at the local government level, where tax collection is outsourced. You know, someone will say, give me 100 million naira, and then you can collect these levies and taxes for as long as you want. And they just print receipts. And they're collecting taxes without accounting for it. The second question is tax collection on telecom services and the telecom sector, especially excise tax and VAT. Are we planning to introduce mobile financial services levies? Is there a strategy to expand the tax base in the telecom sector? The answer is, we see the telecommunication sector as an enabler of the economy. But it also doesn't mean that we should not tax it. What it means for us is we should reduce the 43 taxes maybe to 3 taxes. And one of those taxes could then be an excise tax on telecommunication that you would design in a way that you protect the vulnerable people. For example, if all you do in a month is load credit of 200 naira to flash people all over the place, or another 300 for data, you should not be paying taxes, right? So we can create a threshold to protect those people, and then the rest of us can pay. In many of the East African countries, Kenya, Tanzania, they have excise on telecommunication as high as 18% in Tanzania, for example. So we'll design that properly. We'll also be engaging with the sector in coming up with the design, but that would be only after we have sorted out the issue of multiplicity of taxes before we consider that. We're not planning any taxes on mobile financial services. We think we need financial inclusion. VAT is also an interesting one. Nigeria's VAT system is very different from the rest of the world. No, they will tell you easily, including the IMF, that our 7.5% is one of the lowest in the world. But that's a single story. The complete story is that in over 100 other countries around the world, when you say value-added tax, you get input credit for almost everything, including services and capital investment. That's not the case in Nigeria. So while the headline rate is 7.5%, it can feel like 15%. So what we're saying to ourselves is, we also have ECOWAS protocols that we've signed up to, which require that we increase the rates. While we are increasing the rates, we will reform to give full credit, including on services, and that will benefit telecommunication, for example, as well as on capital investment. You built a factory, you bought plant and equipment, all of those things, you get full credit for the input VAT, so that actually you end up with businesses not bearing the cost of VAT. It goes to the final consumer as the way it should be. Finally, on the quick wins, the question is, what is the timeline? When should we expect to see implementation? Will there be something in the next Finance Act? So the quick wins, we presented to Mr. President about 2-3 weeks ago. I requested Mr. President to allow us come to the Federal Executive Council to discuss with the Cabinet, which he obliged. In fact, even asked whether we need a special FEC session. We're supposed to do that 2 days ago, but Mr. President is out of the country, so now we've been rescheduled for next Monday. But we've actually started the implementation of some of the recommendations already. Some of our recommendations will be implemented by the Ministry of Finance. Some of them will be implemented by Mr. President through an executive order. Some of them will be implemented by the National Assembly. So as we speak now, we have a draft emergency economic intervention bill trying to amend different laws, including laws in Nigeria, can you imagine, that require that you pay taxes and levies in dollars in Nigeria. When we're speaking to the CBN, these numbers are not even small. They're in the region of $3 to $3.5 billion annually. Now, this is dollar, the little dollar you have in Nigeria. You are creating demand against it. So the person has bought a subscription from Zoom, $1,000. There is VAT and withholding tax on it. The law says that VAT and withholding tax you must equally pay in dollars. Not only is that guy finding $1,000 to pay Zoom, he goes back to the forex market looking for about 200 naira to pay Nigerian government. These are some of the issues we've created for ourselves. We have the law now being amended to say, let Nigerian companies and individuals pay taxes and levies in naira. MP and the master should not ask you to pay $400,000 per vessel. As a Nigerian company, where do you find that? So, in summary, our quick wins are now being implemented. That process will continue. The work of my committee is divided into 3 phases: the quick wins, the critical reforms, and implementation phase. Quick wins is what we're doing now. Critical reform is we are rewriting all the major tax laws in Nigeria. And in fact, we are amending Nigeria's constitution to clarify taxing right by levels of government and to ensure that the revenue that they share has some correspondence and correlation with the responsibilities assigned to them by the constitution, for which we all have to hold them to account. The final phase is implementation. Quick wins is 30 days, critical reform 6 months, implementation is 1 year, all 3 running concurrently. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This man is as smooth as silk. Thank you. As he steps down, let's appreciate him, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.